So wrapped up in our stories oftentimes comes this sense of unworthiness in some way. And in fact, I think that that's the number one belief that stops us from living to our full potential, is us feeling for whatever reason that we're unworthy. And of course, as we're talking, that is wrapped up in stories. So some of the things that just, we can do in awareness and of course getting through that stuff is looking at just where our limitations are, what limiting belief systems we've actually created. And in just the dialogue that we're talking about, there's a few different things, I didn't write up the statements fully, but a few things that came up topic-wise. I don't measure up, I can't give enough, I always take orders, I can't get through. And of course we have a number of other things that we're trying, right? And what we can do, of course, is just changing the thought process, changing the language. This is just one simple exercise that you could do even right now, or with any process that you're in the midst of, any relationship, is you can just come back to your authentic, amazing self, just write a line like you see here. There's a limiting belief, and then there's an empowering belief that we can look at. And a lot of that really is just replacement. So looking at antonyms, if you're having a hard time with this, look at the opposite. Just go to word. If you type in a word, just go to thesaurus, antonym, it's good, right? So when you're looking at, don't measure up, okay, well, what came up there is like, hey, I do measure up, but I'm also important. I'm also amazing. I can measure up. We've talked a little bit about abundance and a little bit about scarcity. They're polar opposites. If you are abundant, scarcity can't live there. And one of the topics that we can go into, should we go into the habit section? Yeah? That we can go into is how to break through your habits. Okay? And I want to share with you just a little strategy that really works well, that might give you more insight into this. Okay? I've had the fortune of being able to work with a lot of people from a lot of different walks of life. People that are crazy successful, that are at the top of their game, buying hotels, at the top of the food chain in executive positions, to people that are in different places of anxiety, doubt, fear, breakdowns in relationship, marriage, possible divorce situations, totally needing reconstruction, if you will, of whatever their picture of their life is. Everything is at rock bottom, for instance. That's how they feel. And everything in between. And through that process, I've also recognized, of course, that there's cycles and there's habits that we create. Now, sometimes we say, okay, well, habits. There's negative habits and there's empowering habits. There's, of course, the habits we all know, like simple, right? What's an example of a habit? Just shout it out.
Making your bed in the morning.
Making your bed in the morning, exactly. There you go. What's another example of a habit?
Not making your bed.
Exactly. Yeah. And another one.
Exercise.
Exercise.
Not exercising.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah. How about a deconstructive habit? Being negative. Yeah. Yeah. For sure. Yeah. Look from the youth. What's an unhealthy habit? Not doing homework. All right. What's that? Facebook. Sure, definitely. What was that, Andrew? I'm putting you on the spot. Obviously, we can think of things. Drugs, alcohol abuse, things like that. Okay? So there's a lot of different things, a lot of different ways that we can get into negative habits. All right. We're going to get back to a little bit of more of this limiting beliefs, but do you understand? This is just a simple tool. Do you understand, like, that this can be incredibly powerful? This simple tool. Everybody has the capacity to find a piece of paper and draw a line down the middle of it, and then take a look on the left-hand side, and then just look at limiting beliefs and empowering beliefs. In fact, let's just do that. Let's flip over a piece of paper. You have a lot of pieces of paper. And then draw a line down the middle. And then write down limiting beliefs and empowering beliefs. All right, so think of one limiting belief that just comes up for you. Just one area that you might be limiting yourself, that might be just a negative thought, something that has a lack thinking, scarcity, which is really a feeling of not enough. Okay? Just something that doesn't necessarily measure up, something that you just can't give up for some reason, maybe a judgment or a story, or just anything that you just like feel, even just try to go back into your heart to try to just think of
That
or
is my
feel.
limiting belief. I can't.
What's that?
I'm not saying I can't think of something. I'm saying I can't is the limiting belief.
Okay, excellent. So I can't. All right, perfect. So if you can just write that down on the left-hand side, that would be wonderful. That's a great one, by the way. Just one. Let's start with one. And we're not going to get everybody to share these. So this is just between you and your authentic, amazing self. So what you want to do now is you want to just take a look at the antonym. So there's a power word of some kind in your statement there. Can't is a power word. So what is the power word that's in the statement? So just give yourself an internal dialogue now. So what is the power word? And then think of the antonym to that word. Can't, that's fairly easy, right? Yeah, I am. And of course, if you want to go down the path, this is an example that Greg just brought up here. I can't get through. Attend to yourself and realize and release judgments, and then create a possibility or create a possibility thinking, so you can even go a little bit deeper. So possibility thinking will help you, of course, with that. And what I mean by possibility thinking is it's just a framework of thinking where you can start to see yourself as more, you can start to see the picture of there being more perspective, a different angle, more meaning, more overflow. So just sink into that meaning, sink into the meaning of the empowering belief. I want to give you a really easy to remember acronym here. BBER. I'm from Canada, I really get this one. The middle of winter, that one really resonates with me. BBER! It's really cold, right? So I came up with this acronym because I think that sometimes we just need simple. Keep it simple. There's so many things around beliefs and stories, and all of this is really valid and important, but when it comes to habits that we want to create and habits that are negative habits that we do have, we sometimes need something simple to be able to like, okay, boom, need to get over this thing, go back, hey, how's my BBER going? Just say, hey, how's my BBER going? How's my BBER going? Okay, so I'm going to give you the acronym of what it all stands for. Where it came from is I was working with a client. At the time that I started working with this guy, he had 39 intubations, meaning that he had been in the hospital 39 times. Near-death experiences, when you're intubated, basically they're sucking all the fluids out of your lungs. He was a very, 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 very bad smoker. He had the little trach in his throat. And when he came to the point of saying, yeah, I need a life coach, I need some help, his mother actually was intervening on his behalf, saying, Matt, if you don't get a coach or you don't get some help, there will be some serious consequences that I might not even have you in 1 year. he was so dire in his situation that he probably would not have been with us had there not been a change. So, yes, he recognized smoking was a massive problem. So much so that he needed to have the trach. The trach was there not just because, it was affecting his throat. It was so that they could rapidly, jam the thing in there to actually, suction it out if necessary. So it was pretty bad. So I started working with him. And we were working on limiting beliefs and empowering beliefs. We were working on confidence. And of course he had, which is very typical, quite a low self-image, low self-esteem. Why? Because he was in this situation, and to boot, Matt had one other thing. He was a quadriplegic. So he had only functionality with a small part of his movement. And he could do this with one hand. This hand, this side, totally couldn't do anything, but he could do this. So he had power over something. What did he have power over? What did he have power over? Come on. What he could put into his mouth. Yes, yes. What else did he have power over? He had power over the motion that would allow for him to smoke. He could smoke. He had power here. So for him, that was a bit of a struggle because he had the power to do something, and for him, he was letting it go. And part of the reason why he smoked was because of feelings of unworthiness and unacceptance and stories that he had told himself about his past. Now, we worked through a lot of those stories, and the confidence came, and it was starting to grow, but there was one time where he quit smoking, and then he went back into the smoking, and then he'd feel so ashamed, and I always tried to just release judgment and just tell him that, affirm him, and when I'd come to see him. And then he's like, yeah, Scott, I messed up. I've been smoking. Oh. And without judgment, remind him of his why he wants to do this. Get him to attach himself to a greater vision of himself and where he could be. We worked through some of these things, and I remember one time I came for a session, and he was in one of these homes because he was basically needing some help with people to bring him into his bed and things like that because he was a quadriplegic. And I came to his home and he wasn't there, and the person on staff told me, "Oh no, he's in the hospital." I was like, "Really?" "Yeah, it's pretty bad." It's like, "Maybe you should go and see him." Okay. I went straight to the hospital. I came there, he was totally asleep. I didn't realize this until the next day. His mom called me. And apparently what had happened that day is that they'd actually given him one of these pieces of paper. Now, I'm not in the medical field. I don't know exactly how this goes. But they made him sign a do not resuscitate. That's a whole nother story, because his mom had the power of attorney and things like that, where she was very upset about why that had happened. But they were at a point, the hospital staff were at a point where it's like, this guy is very gone. This is like the 40th time he's been in here with this issue. His lungs don't look very clean. They don't look very good. He came out of the hospital, again, with more motivation to change. We were working together at that time every week. And we just said, okay, well, we need to draw a line in the sand. And one of the things, just to keep it simple, that I came up with at that time, because we were always talking about the same things, that let's just make an acronym, let's call it BBER. And it helped him incredibly. And to this day, I can tell you that Matt is not only off the cigarettes for 2 years, but he's actually motivational speaking and telling his story.
Wow.
In front of hundreds of kids. In fact, his audience is usually schools. Travels around, he's on a circuit telling his story. So what is the acronym? Behavior. What behavior are you doing? What behavior are you in the middle of? Smoking is an extreme acronym, right? But at his level for sure. So he knew that he needed to quit that behavior. But I'll go with the story, and as I'm telling this story, I'm modeling for you something that you've chosen as perhaps a limitation or a habit that you're in that might be a destructive or negative habit. That could be a lot of different things, okay? But I'll just tell you Matt's story, hopefully to model something for you as you're thinking about the different habits that you possibly have that you need to break through, okay? So in his situation, he had a behavior. So what is his behavior? So his behavior was wrapped up in his thinking, which had an outward effect. So his situation, sometimes feeling like, hey, you know, poor me because I'm in this situation. Sometimes thinking, okay, well, what can I really do with my life, or different things, or having a strong sense of judgment on himself. Because even after, you know, that situation, he had some judgments that he was placing on himself. So we had to tackle some of his behaviors that were, as a result, or manifesting out of his thinking and his processes and his behaviors. Okay? So we took a look at his thinking. So we just say, okay, well, what behaviors are you in the midst of right now? We talked about that. The second one, beliefs. Now, we talked lots about beliefs already. But oftentimes our conversations would be simple conversations about, hey, what are we telling ourselves today? What kind of incantations are we talking about right now? What kind of declarations are we saying that are true about ourselves right now? And our goal is to do a visualization a little bit later to actually get out of the scarcity thinking and into the abundance thinking. So really we wanted to talk about some of the lack thinking and the limiting thinking that he was going on, because that was of course tied into story and beliefs. Beliefs about how he could even achieve this whole thing about quitting smoking. Right? Beliefs that he could do something more. Because when we started to talk about the something more thing, there was always a life that came from that. There was always a meaning that came from that. And then also, in his case, it was a belief in something greater than himself. Just a belief in self isn't enough. There's something greater. Wherever you're at faith-wise, this is where you attach a greater meaning to something that's greater than yourself, a higher calling, a higher belief. And oftentimes it comes with us just attaching some faith in that higher thing. In God, for an example. Just having that belief. Second one. Environments. This was so huge for Matt. There were certain places where I could expect that he would be smoking. If I showed up at his place, there were two spots that were exactly the spots where I know I could find him. If he was smoking, he was out the front at this particular area, or he was out the back at this particular area. There's two spots. And then when you'd go out, he'd tell me all the environments. When he'd go to this particular place or this restaurant, he knew that there was an outdoor back door. He'd go and he'd smoke over here. When he's with this particular person, it accentuated because this person over here added to, because he smoked as well, added to his lack of restraint to be able to, quit smoking. So if he's in a spot where he's like, oh, I'm not going to smoke this week, if he'd hang around with this particular person, it would just happen. Right? So he needed to do some things that were radical. And radical, if you look in the dictionary, really means extremist. Doing something that's extreme. So you may need it to make some extreme changes. So some of the extreme changes were changing the places and environments that he would go to. And then look, again, limiting and empowering. Look at some better and different environments that he could go to. So in your case, this might mean that you need to get outside of the house and go off and do something totally different that you haven't done before. So if you're stuck in a habit of some kind, that possibly could mean that you need to go out and you need to approach a new group or a meetup group or something else that will help you get around that sphere, if you will, of influence, people that are empowering you, that could empower you, to be able to break through some of the habits that you've been doing. Because when you're at that place where everything is normal, and you're in that office space, if you will, it's easy to get sucked back into the habits. to be really real, a lot of people find that when they're in their office space, that it's just that mundane or that sort of that certain type of atmosphere that they have in there. And to get creative, they need to get out of their office to be able to do something different, to have a different result. Some people get up early in the morning, they change their habit that way. You need to change your environments. Last one. These don't matter if you don't apply this one. All of these over here will just get you limited results. Unless you use the R, which is replace. So in Matt's case, what do we need to do? It wasn't just enough for him to not smoke or to go to those environments. It wasn't just enough for him to change his thinking and all of the behaviors. It wasn't just enough for him to change his belief systems and to look at different belief systems. He needed to replace that particular thing, and the time that he was spending over there was something else that was more empowering. All right? Some of the things that he wanted to do, or that he did, was he actually dove himself into reading. For him, it was sometimes it was reading the Bible or reading a book. Sometimes it was writing. He'd get creative. He'd do art. There's wheelchair art that he would get into. He'd hang out with different people. Even for him, his sake, it was like, hey, I'm going to movies, or I'm going to take a long drive around. So he needed to replace that. And then in addition to that, replace that with something that was a higher calling for him. So he actually found different opportunities, and people came to him to buy his art. He's selling his pieces of art, and he's doing motivational speaking, which had a greater meaning for him. So things are expanding, okay? So for you, this is just one model. It's one story of how I've helped somebody to break through in their life through a major habit, to not just come out the other side, but to actually be better. And you can look at breaking through anything that you think that's negative, and you can easily just go back to BER. So you can just say to yourself, hey, how's my BER going? Look at your neighbor and just tell them, I'm amazing. Just say. Come on. Let's get the energy up there. Just look at your neighbor and say, hey, I'm amazing. And then just tell that person, hey, you're amazing.
You're amazing.
That's it. That's it.
Awesome. You're amazing, Dad.
Great. I stopped myself. So that's just one simple tool that I think is fantastic for us to just go through. There's a number of power habits that you can go with if that helps you, but just keep the BER thing in mind. Some people use the KISS strategy to just keep it simple. Don't overcomplicate this habit thing. Don't judge yourself, obviously. Focus on it. Some people like the idea of meditations or visualizations. Getting up early, I mentioned, is another power habit that you can choose to change your environment, change your state, change and shift from one place to another to be able to get to that place. And then using powerful words, words that will change, empowering words. Change your goods to greats. Change your okay, I'm okay, to hey, I'm doing really good. Sometimes we do have to prime the pump, if you will, with some of the things that we feel, but being authentic still, we can change our languaging, and that's one thing that you can do, changing your words and knowing the power of words, and then making the rewards a crucial thing. So looking at some reward system when you do achieve any kind of habits that you're looking at, there should be some sort of reward system that you attach to it. So when you've achieved a certain element of it, it's not just, Matt's habit over here, he needed to reward himself at multiple times. One of the things that I put out there for a reward system for him, I said, hey, if we can make it when we make it to 6 months, the first time that we do that, what kind of restaurant do you want me to take you to? Red Lobster. In Canada, that's like a seafood place. So we went, and I remember having that dinner, and we reflected about the last 6 months, how he made it through, what he had to do. We talked about the reward. He had the most amazing meal because he was it's just kind of food. So it's a reward system. So you can build an internal reward system that helps you as well. So there you go. So just remember BER. All right.